Hi, I'm Scott, and today I'm going to show you how I built this 2-drawer Valet box on Dad It Yourself. So today's project is a Valet box made out of 3S black walnut. A friend of mine is giving this as a gift to his fiancé, who is being commissioned in the Navy. I started by planing this board down to a 1/2 inch on my Ryobi planer, and then cutting the first piece off of that, which is the front panel, which is a different height than the sides. And here I am ripping those side panels to their final height. Now I'm cutting the front panel to its height, which is 3/8 of an inch taller than the side panels. The front, back, and side panels all get a 3/16 inch kerf on the top and bottom. Setting my router table here, checking the bearing for alignment with the fence, and cutting all the kerfs on those panels. I've set my router table up with the 1/4 inch straight cutting bit to cut the dados for the bottom panel, the shelf panel, and the top panel. Now that all the dados are cut, I can sand the inside down to 220 grit. It's nearly impossible to sand it once it's assembled. Using my miter saw to cut the bevels on the front face, and then cut the individual back and side panels from the longer piece that I've been working with. If you remember earlier, I said that the front panel was 3/8 of an inch taller than the side panels. That's because I have to cut the drawer faces out, which is 3 1/8 curve cuts. And here that is. Here's that front panel after I've cut the drawers out, and you can see there's a really nice pattern match across that front. Before I planed the original board down to a 1/2 inch, I took this piece off and I'm resawing it down to make the top panel. Unfortunately, I don't have a bandsaw big enough, so I had to have a friend resaw this for me. Now I'm taking those resawn pieces and planing them down to their final thickness of a 1/4 inch, and then I'll glue them up. So gluing these two book match pieces together is just a matter of some painter's tape and some Titebond 3, and then letting that dry overnight so it's nice and dry before I cut it to size. While I'm waiting for that top panel to dry, I have to make the first shelf panel, which is a padded shelf with blue velvet, and that's just a matter of ripping it to length, cross-cutting it with the miter saw to width, gluing some felt pad on one of them, and then blue felt on the other one. So one will be the bottom panel, and one will be the bottom of the top shelf. So it's the next day, and that top panel is completely dry. I'm squaring up one edge with my homemade track saw with a circular saw on it. Now that I have a square edge, I can cut this panel to size on my miter saw. took the top panel and had it engraved, and now I'm just sanding down the 220 to get rid of the laser flash off the panel before we do the glue up. So all the pieces and panels are cut and sanded, and now it's time to put finish on the inside before the glue up. I'm using Simple Finish from Maker Brand. If you haven't had a chance to check this out, it's really great stuff. You just wipe it on, let it dry, wipe a second coat on, and it is done. I'll have a link in the description for it. So now for the glue up, again I'm using Type Bond 3. I laid these down for book matching so the grain pattern goes all the way around the sides. Lay some glue in the joints, spread it around with a silicone brush, and then pull the back and the sides up and tape them across, and then slide the panels in. And somehow I lost the footage showing sliding the panels in, but here's what it looked like when it was all done. As we all know, you can never have too many clamps, so I'll let this dry overnight and we'll get working on it tomorrow. So it's actually a couple of days later. Let's get these clamps off and move on to the next part of the project, which is cutting the lid off. By far the scariest thing I've done to this box, because if I screw this up, I'll ruin the whole project. I did learn a trick after the fact that using some wedges and painter's tape as you cut the kerfs out to keep everything aligned actually makes for a nice cut, but I got lucky this time. Moving on to the drawers, I have this 1/2 inch stock that I'm ripping to 1.5 inches, which makes up the 4 sides of the drawer. And then I'm going to miter it on the miter saw to a 45-degree angle and assemble those drawers. Using my handy homemade jig to cut all the 1/8 dados in the drawer bottoms. I'm going to glue up the back and sides of the drawers and let those sit for a little while I make the drawer bottoms. Drawer bottoms are made out of 1/8 inch Luan and cut to size on my table saw and miter saw. Now that the drawer bottoms are made, I can slide those into the dados we made earlier, glue on the front part of the drawer, and then put that in clamps and let that dry for a little while. Now that the boxes are dry, I can use my router table and a 1/2-inch bit to cut the drawer slide slots in the side of each drawer body. Made these drawer runners out of some scrap walnut that I had. Just sand those down so they're nice and smooth and get them ready for installation. So I built these spacers. They're about 1/16 over 1/4 of an inch, whatever that math is, that sits on the bottom panel in here, and it's just a small lip that when I slide the bottom drawer in, it provides just enough clearance for this lower shelf, and that will help me place these runners I made in here like this to get those centered on the outer bulkhead. And then I'll flip this over, put those spacers in the top panel, and then do the exact same thing, and it leaves about a 1/16 inch clearance between the two drawers. I'm using regular wood glue and CA glue for each of these rails. The CA glue is just to hold it in right away, and then the wood glue is for long-term adhesion. Just slide the rail in, make sure none of the glue seeps out and glues the drawer to the side. Give it a good push so that CA glue grabs on, and then I can pull that drawer out and make sure everything's good, and then move on to the next rail. And all the rails are installed and they work awesome. Now it's time to put the drawer faces on the drawers, and just like before, I used a little CA glue and white glue to get those to adhere well. This is a great opportunity to make sure your gaps on that drawer face are nice and even. Final sanding here with 150 on a flat board to make sure I get a good mating surface between the drawers, the lid, and the box. I use a pencil mark to see if there's any low spots, and then I took my orbital sander with 220 around the outside of the box just to clean up all the edges and make sure all the mating surfaces were even. So now to fit all the hardware. I got these brass quadrant hinges from Rockler. They're really nice and they hold the box to a 90 degree. I glued them in position with some CA glue and then went around them with a X-Acto knife to set the edges in the grain, marked them with a pencil, and then free-handed most of the wood out of the way with a straight bit on my palm router, and then cleaned it up with a chisel. So there's these small hold back bars that hold the hinge at 90 degrees, and they actually have to go down inside a hole right here that I've marked with the hinge, as you can see right here. What that does, sits like that and holds the hinge at 90 degrees. So I'm going to set up my drill press and drill this hole down so that this has a place to sit when the hinge is closed. And the final step to prepare for hardware was to drill the holes for the drawer pulls. Okay, so everything's been hand sanded down to 220, tacked it off to get it dust free, and it's ready for finish. I'm going to be using this simple finish from Maker Brand. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, this is some really good stuff. You wipe it on twice, buff it out, and it's ready to go. I'll have a link down in the description if you're interested in picking some of that up for yourself. Okay, let's get some finish on this and finish this project up. The drawers are lined with a piece of foam and blue felt, and that's glued in place with CA glue, and the edges are just tucked down. The top compartment is divided into 4 sections, 2 large and 2 small, and these are just 1/2-inch pieces of maple that are glued in place. And for the final step, putting in all of the drawer hardware, including the lid hinge, the drawer pulls, and that wraps up this project. So I built this box using plans from the Woodworking Journal. The plans originally have a single drawer, but my customer wanted 2 drawers, so it was just a matter of doing a little bit of math here and there. The great thing about using a preset of plans is all the build order and everything's all put together, and it made it really easy to go together. There were some challenges with this, learning some new techniques and some of the limitations I have with my tools, but I'm really happy with how it came out. It's black walnut with maple accents, and then lined with a blue velvet, and then it's engraved here and on the top as well. If you have any questions on how I built this, put those down in the comments. Speaking of comments, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. Some videos over here you may be interested in. Subscribe button's right there. Thanks for watching. Dad it yourself.